Okay, greetings to everyone. I am Ntombi Mcoyi from Africa Unite, and I'm so pleased to have today Mr. David van Wyn, who I have the pleasure of having a conversation with. David van Wyn is from the Benchmark Foundation, and we are going to be talking about the Stilfontein mines and the tragedy that has just resurfaced. I personally myself didn't know much about it until it came out in the news, but a lot of human rights violations that we have seen. There are 78 people who were killed in the mine, and 46 survivors. So, David, I know your profile is really so vast, and you have great experience in terms of the mines and advocating about the mines. I'm glad that you've mentioned some of the possible solutions because the way we may see things and it's normalized. We actually don't know that there's a way out, that there's a better way of doing things. And to me, it seems like it's a capitalist society that kind of suppresses those who don't have money, keeps the poverty there, so the very few can then reap the fruit of the labor of so many. So it brings me to a bigger question before we end off, because we are now ending off, is how, and not only in mining, but in all different sectors, how do we begin to shift the power from, the people who have all the resources, who use the power to suppress others or exploit others? How do we shift power towards, community development, towards people being able to live with dignity?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very good question. The thing is with mining towns, they are dying. And if you look at these old mines, they had incredible infrastructure. They had workshops, they had housing, they had sport and recreation facilities, they had health facilities, and so on. And instead of breaking them down, we should actually reincorporate them into the community. Okay. The other thing is that you can use mines for other than mining. An ultra deep level mine is so hot underneath that you can run turbines that can generate electricity. The mine waste sites cannot be used for agriculture anymore because the soil is poisonous. You can turn them into solar farms that can be earned by the community. For the small scale mining that takes place there, you can create a value chain of jewelry manufacturing and processing of the minerals and things like that, which can also create jobs. But you see, the thing is that once you've got this notion that everything must be owned privately instead of collectively or socially or communally by the community, you reduce the people to being labor. They are just labor for someone else to make a profit. If he no longer makes a profit, he retrenches them, he walks away. The mine stands there. The mine still can generate an income, but it's now illegal because it's privately owned. It is not owned by society. It's not owned by the community. It's not owned by the labor. So you actually have to change the ownership structures in the country. And the ownership structures came about as a result of settler colonialism. It basically concentrated all the land in the country in the hands of settler colonists and excluded the vast majority of people from any ownership except ownership of their own labor, which they then sold. And now those industries around which that settler colony was created are collapsing, and these people are left unemployed. But the structures that have been put in place can still be used to create labor and dignified life and so on for people. So you have a situation, for example, where a whole mining town stands here, it is abandoned, and there's an informal settlement there. Instead of making the housing available for the informal settlers and making it dignified, you allow the informal settlers to strip the houses and make shacks. So you are degrading housing. So just as you degrade labor, you are degrading housing in the country.
It becomes a ripple effect.
It becomes a ripple effect. Now, the question also is, in the South African context, we are 30 years after 1994. Why is it that if I drive in any road, the people who are walking are black, the people who are driving are white, the people who are on bicycles are black, except whites do bicycles for exercise, or they do jogging for exercising, but they don't walk to work. They don't have to take taxis to work. They don't have to or to school or whatever. You know, why is it that the racial division of our society is still absolutely obvious? I live in a suburb in Bloemfontein, which is absolutely beautiful, well maintained and everything. But if I go to the township, there's not even tarred roads there. The housing is absolutely appalling. The RDP housing is worse than the apartheid matchbox housing that was there. And we struggled against this. I spent 10 years in exile struggling against these things. We were hoping to see a different kind of society after 1994. And what simply happened was the mine bosses got the liberation movement leaders together in Zambia at a conference in Kitwe in 1984. They caused the ANC to expel all the radicals from its ranks and said, okay, now we're going to deal with you. We can make you, the leaders of the ANC, very wealthy by giving you a share in the mining industry. But don't change anything regarding the labor relations and so on. Don't change anything regarding our control of the economy effectively. And what is preventing South Africa from becoming a manufacturing economy is exactly mining, because people earn so little money that they cannot buy manufactured goods. So there's no incentive for anyone to invest in this country in manufacturing, because you're simply not going to sell your goods, and you're too far away from international markets to be competitive against the Chinese and the Japanese and everyone else who floods those markets with their goods. So that cheap labor system is actually what is preventing the country from stepping up beyond mining. And so long as we are fixated on mining, the government doesn't seem to have any other developmental option other than mining. And the problem is that mining is not renewable, therefore it's not sustainable. Once the minerals are gone, they are gone.
So what I also hear you saying when you talk about, it's black people who are walking, white people who are driving, really it's still the same apartheid system, but with different faces.
Well, it's become a class system more than a racial system now. Well, it's still a racial system because there are no really poor whites in this country. They are not living in big squatter camps, and they're not and we don't want them to be there. But we want everyone's standard of living to be raised. We moved petty apartheid. We can go to the movies together. We can sit in the same restaurant. You can sit in this guest house in this fine suburb. No one will come and chase you out like they did in the 1980s or 1990s. But actual structural apartheid is still very much in place.
Yes. And that becomes the bigger issue, because if it's structural, that means it will remain there and be sustained there and enabled in a way. So to just end off now, David, if you can maybe give words of encouragement or direction or guidance as civil society, as the common person on the ground, because so often we look to government, we look to businesses to try and fuel our lives and give us money or ways of living. What can we do for ourselves as civil society, as communities, in terms of shifting the power from those who have the resources to us recognizing and realizing our own resources amongst ourselves?
Well, I think the important thing here is that we need to, and civil society and academics and the left and everyone, they make this mistake. They have endless conferences, like I'm attending a conference now. Very few of them actually go on the ground into communities. They're scared of the working class. And there's a high level of crime in the country. I can understand that people are scared, but I've worked with almost for 20 years. I've never carried a gun. I've never had private security. I've never been threatened by these guys at all. All of them say, please legalize us. We want to get rid of the syndicates. We want to work for ourselves. We want to, at the moment, we are just simply being exploited. And the Stilfontein story absolutely exploded the myths that the government is perpetuating, the myth that people are afraid of Zamazamas. Stilfontein people went to help the Zamazamas. They went to rescue the Zamazamas. They complained about the behavior of the police and so on. You know, the police always refer to the Randburg rape case. You know, that case disappeared because one of the people in the security contingent organized that rape. Okay? And they were on a site which should have been fenced off because it's a radioactive site. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. There should have been signposts everywhere and security preventing people, which is what is required by law and regulation by the National Nuclear Regulator. Yet these sites are not secured at all in South Africa. I can take you into any mine site that has been abandoned. There's no attempt at securing it. The other thing is that the government can only be held accountable by citizens that are aware. You know, so we have to do awareness campaigns in schools, in communities, among women's groups, among environmental groups, among and you know, in civil society, it's very easy to have a very nice niche in this system because the problem in the system is what's paying my wages. Therefore, I have no interest in really solving the problem. You know, as long as the problem exists, funders are going to fund me. So I actually need to work myself out of a job if I want to solve the problem.
Of course, I believe in that.
And this is what civil society should be doing. You know, the other thing is that we need to create. There's a crisis of democracy in South Africa. We could see in the last election the majority of people didn't vote. And the parties who are in parliament are not representing the people of South Africa. They're representing the minority that voted. So people no longer believe in the system of voting. And I'll tell you a nice story. In 1893, Cecil Rhodes sends Charles Bright to Bulawayo to organize a concession with King Lubangula. And Lubangula makes a cross on a piece of paper. And he loses his entire country as a result of that cross on a piece of paper. So 2 years later, Rhodes invades him with Maxim guns. He shoots the independent nation to pieces. He steals 93,000 head of cattle from them that he brings back to South Africa. And he parcels out the land between the mercenaries that carried out that military activity. Sure. That's the 5,000 Rhodesian farmers that we are all crying about having lost their land to Mugabe. Completely misrepresented in the Western media in any case. So this thing of making a cross on a piece of paper, you're handing your political rights and responsibilities to a professional politician who comes and sits in Cape Town and gets rich while your plight is simply ignored. This Western democracy doesn't work. We need to form a new participatory democracy system where everyone participates in their daily lives in solving their problems and overcoming the challenges that are facing them.
I love it. Thank you.
Okay.
A participatory democracy where everyone is involved, our communities are involved, and we all take part in building a better South Africa. Thank you so much, David. It's been so valuable having you and having this discussion with you.
Well, you've got lots of youth working with you in all kinds of townships. You maybe should be meeting with our youth. Maybe we should have communal workshops. We run workshops all the time. Our monitors and so on run the workshops on their own now. Maybe we should invite you to participate in those. Maybe we could participate in yours.
Wonderful. Africa Unite would definitely appreciate that, and we really can work much more in terms of the synergies that we have.
That's excellent. And thank you for handling yourself first.
Right. Well, it's